is up, everyone? Welcome to this edition of There Can Only Be One, the podcast that puts together the all-star best-of playlist of your favorite bands and artists, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Now, if you grew up in the 80s, I guarantee you know the band that we're talking about because they had a song that came out that literally almost defined pop culture in the 80s. That's because we're talking about the B-52's. And here to join me for this show, Sherry Thomas from the Aquarian, making her There Can Only Be One debut. Sherry, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on. Now, before we get into this and before we talk about the B-52's, please let us know about the Aquarian.
Well, the Aquarian Weekly has been an alternative weekly that has been in the New Jersey area for over 50 years, and it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I've had the pleasure of writing for them for quite a few years now.
And you are personally right now doing this really cool article, this weekly article on music podcasts that people should be listening to.
Yes, I am. It's called Have You Heard That Music Podcast? I know, very generic name, but you get the idea.
But the nice thing, too, is that for all of our listeners, by the way, thank you to all our listeners for listening. But if you are looking for other music podcasts to listen to, this is a phenomenal place to go to discover new shows, new voices, and be introduced to new music along the way. So, Sherry, great job for putting that together. Thank you for that. And thank you on behalf of myself and the other podcasters that you have featured thus far. It means a lot.
Well, my pleasure. I used to have a music podcast, and podcasting in general has been one of my favorite things to listen to and also participate in.
Oh, and they're so much fun. I mean, I may be a little biased, seeing how I kind of host one here, but they are a ton of fun and a great way not just talk about music, but to experience new music like this episode that we're about to do, because I'm not going to lie, my knowledge of the B-52's kind of boils down to the singles until having to do the deep dive into this. But Sherry, for you, because you mentioned the B-52's, what is it about them that made you want to go through this discography?
Oh, I can list so many reasons why. I think for me, it was just the fact that they were different and quirky, and they offered something that many other bands didn't at the time. So they've always been a favorite of mine, and they continue to be in my playlist. So that's all I could really say about the B-52's.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they always kind of defined that college radio vibe because it, aside from certain songs, it wasn't necessarily mainstream pop rock radio. There's a ton of influences in here and a lot of different avenues. Like if you like electronic music, if you like, kind of Devo-esque, if you like pop, if you like rock, if you like funk, there's a little bit of something for everybody with the B-52's, and you don't really get that with a lot of bands.
Right, I agree. I concur with that completely. All of the different sounds that you hear from the B-52's range from the girl from Ipanema to, there are guitar-driven tracks. There are tracks that are just plain off of the wall. You can't really put the B-52's in a particular box because they're out of the box completely.
Oh, completely. But a very unique sound. Like if you hear a B-52 song, it's a B-52 song.
Yeah, I agree.
So here is what we are going to do. We are about to go through the 8-album studio discography of the B-52's. Now, this means we are not covering any live albums, remix albums, or compilations. So a song like Debbie, which was actually on the Time Capsule Songs for a Future Generation compilation, doesn't qualify. But that also means, dear listeners, that we're not going to do their song from the Flintstones film, Not going to happen. It exists out there, though, so I'm sure somewhere down the road that will get talked about.
I'm kind of glad that we're not talking about that one.
The funny thing is, I know that movie qualifies for It's Not That Bad. So somewhere down the road, I'm going to have to go down that road, and then I'm going to talk about that song for the B-52's. But that day is not today. But we're going to start with their self-titled debut album. At this point, the band is Kate Pearson, Fred Schneider, Keith Strickland, Cindy Wilson, and Ricky Wilson. The album hit number 59 in the US and number 7 in Australia and number 3 in New Zealand. It is double platinum in Australia and platinum in the US and New Zealand. There were 5 singles off of this one. Rock Lobster peaked the highest, hitting number 56 in the US, and I get to say this with a big old smile on my face, it hit number 1 in Canada. Rock Lobster was a number 1 hit in the Great White North. So, Sherry, off of the B-52's self-titled debut album, what did you go with?
Well, Rock Lobster was in my short list. However, it did not make my favorite song. My pick is 6060842.
And why that song in particular?
Well, I mean, it's the predecessor to 8675309 by Tommy Two-Tone and Bathroom Wall by Faster Pussycat. I mean, who can't resist a song about a number on a bathroom wall?
The funny thing is, and yes, I did have 6060842 on my short list. I also had Planet Claire on my short list. I will say when I saw the title for 6060842, I'm like, that looks, because of the way they wrote it down, I'm like, that looks like a European number. Shouldn't there be like 011 before that and a few more numbers at the end of it? Plus, it's a 1979 album when there's only 7 digits in the phone number, not the area code included. I had to go with Rock Lobster. Aside from the fact that it's a catchy as hell song, this is literally, I feel like I'm about to be an Inside Out. This was a core memory unlocked for me. So let me explain. I used to DJ in my high school days and was part of a mixed guiding scouting youth group. So I DJed those dances. Rock Lobster was a must to be played at every single one of those dances because it was part of what we called the 4-song set of death. So we had Rock Lobster, it was YMCA, there was Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and there was Moni Moni. All 4 songs needed to be played back to back to back to back. And yes, there was a dance that involved Rock Lobster. It involved sit-ups. It was the most athletic dance I think we ever did. But it's just one of those things where Rock Lobster was very much part of my high school days growing up because of the fact that I was DJing. And like, when you hear like Moni Moni, yes, okay, I understand. YMCA, yeah, it's got to be there. Paradise by the Dashboard Light, little long, but that's okay. You can still dance to it. Rock Lobster is the outlier, but yet it was the one that everyone lost their ish for.
Yes, and I recall going to fraternity parties, high school parties, any kind of party in my high school and college years. That song had to be included, and you had to see which one could go the lowest to the floor without falling. that was a must.
Oh yeah, any song that starts going down, down, and for a while, and you are literally like, if your knees are in any bad shape, this is not the song to be on the dance floor to. I'm sorry, you're not going to make it back up, or you're going to be really slow getting back up. It's quirky, it's fun, it's boppy. And it does not surprise me that it hit number 1 in Canada because, again, it was one of those songs that just got played and still gets played today on various Sirius XM stations. There's a reason why it's that damn catchy.
Oh, I know. And Dave Grohl said that was a pivotal moment in his life to see the B-52's on Saturday Night Live. That, sparked a little creative yearning in him to create music. So there's a little nugget for you.
And the funny thing is, the guitar riff in it, it's not a hard guitar riff. So it's a very easy song to kind of, pick up, and the minute you start playing that riff, everyone knows. We now move on to Wild Planet, released August 27th, 1980. The album peaked at number 18 in the US and number 3 in New Zealand and is gold in the US. There were 3 singles off of this one. Private Idaho peaked the highest, hitting number 74 in the US and number 11 in Australia. So Sherry, off of Wild Planet, what's on your list?
Well, Private Idaho is my pick for the song that I love the most off of that album. And, there are quite a few others on the list that made the short list, but Private Idaho is my favorite off of the album. Undeniable.
I mean, I remember going through this album for this episode, and when Private Idaho came on, I'm like, this is a really good song. Like, I'll admit, this album to me is what I like to refer to as a hamburger, where the beginning and the end of the album, they're kind of bread-like. The meat is definitely in the middle of this album, because Private Idaho is in the middle of the album, and so is Devil in My Car. It's got a cool rock vibe. This is a song that I would love to, if I ever get a chance to see the B-52's, this is one of those songs I would want to see live. Mainly also because Kate's rasp on this fits so well, and the harmonies are straight on point. Like, that's the thing. Between Kate and Cindy, their harmonies together really work so well. I mean, you think about bands that live and breathe on their harmonies, and you think about early Alice in Chains between Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell. Those harmonies are on point. Kate and Cindy together, like, that is harmony magic when they're paired.
It is. And Devil in My Car is on my short list as well, along with Strobe Light and Dirty Back Road.
Yeah, I mean, Strobe Light was also one of those ones I was looking at. It's basically like within like 3 or 4 songs, like all the good stuff is right in that little bunch. So clearly when they were putting the album, at least the track listing together, they're like, let's put all these together. Like, this is a good run. This is kind of like their 3 or 4 song set of death, as far as DJs would go.
I agree. I think the best albums are the ones that have the meat in the middle, like you said, because you're not expecting it. You're, the first couple are okay, and then bam, they get you.
Well, and that's the thing too, because obviously we're talking about an album that was released in 1980. So you either listen to it on vinyl or you listen to it on cassette. So if you have a hamburger album and the meat's in the middle, so you start, okay, it's all good, but then you get to the good songs, and then you flip the vinyl over, or you flip the cassette over, or you had that yellow, Sony Walkman that played backwards as well. It automatically kicks back in, and you got the good stuff to start, and all you have to do is get through. I wonder if anyone ever actually timed it out, like, all right, side A at this point in the album, this is where the good stuff starts, but then flip it over, that's also where the good stuff ends on side B. I'm curious if anyone ever actually perfectly timed it out.
I don't know. I think there's a science to song order on albums, and I've been asked by different musicians and bands to listen to their songs and ask me where I would place a song, which is very bizarre. I'm like, well, you should know, it's your stuff. But I guess they want another ear to let them know where they think, the right placement is for a particular song. I find the science of it interesting.
Oh, I mean, you have to think that organizing an album order has to be as grueling and frustrating as putting together a set list. Because I know, in speaking of someone who plays in a cover band and plays shows, whenever I'm putting together a set list, I am literally thinking about the flow, where are the breathers, where is the crowd going to pop, what songs blend into each other very well. Like, there is an art to putting together an order of songs. And the same goes for an album. I mean, you're lucky if it's a concept album, then it's got to go in the order that you write the story. But here, there has to be that art. And I think the B-52's did this very well, where they did make hamburger albums as opposed to, for lack of a better term, the KFC double down of albums where the buns are like the chicken, and that's the best part of the actual sandwich.
I love that analogy.
Never thought we'd have KFC Double Down as an album analogy, but here we are. And here we are in 1982 with the release of the Mesopotamia EP, released on January 27th of that year. Album was actually produced by David Byrne, but if you do a little bit of research, you know that apparently did not go so well, which is why it's an EP and not a full-length album. The album peaked at number 35 in the US, and there were two singles, Deep Sleep and Mesopotamia, which did not chart. Now, we are talking about a lot of songs that some of you may have not heard of. So if you go to our website at notthatbadcast.com, underneath the episode link, you're going to see the playlist that Sherry and I put together. Unfortunately, Mesopotamia is one of those albums that is not on Spotify. You can find it on YouTube, and I will happily put the link to the playlist on YouTube from this album. But now, Sherry, off of this EP, what's on your list?
Well, Mesopotamia, the single, is on my short list along with Lava, but my pick is Nip It in the Bud.
Yeah, you can definitely hear the David Byrne influence on this EP. It's much more electronic. It's much more, like, for lack of a better term, there was a Devo vibe, I think, going on with this EP. And I don't know if it mixed well with the band. I mean, I guess it's all based on personal preference. For me, I have no short list. My one and only pick off of this is Throw That Beat in the Garbage. That one it's a lot of fun. Fred Schneider's voice, it works perfectly for this. And that's the thing, too. When you think Devo, Fred Schneider's voice should definitely be up front on this album. You get that with Throw That Beat in the Garbage. It's a fun bop. The album is as a whole, maybe not as strong as the self-titled debut and as Wild Planet, but it's definitely worth diving into.
Oh, I concur with that. Not my top album, but or EP rather, but it has some solid work on it.
Yeah, I think the best analogy for this EP is that this is like their Zootopia. If you listen to the Joshua Tree, if you listen to some of those other U2 albums, and then you get to Zootopia, and it's like, what the heck is this? Like, it's a departure from what you had with Achtung Baby, which I can't say without adding phlegm to it. But Zootopia was definitely out there. It was an outlier as far as their sound went. Some liked it. Some were like, what the hell are you doing? But they were experimenting, and that's cool. And I guess you can say the same thing about Mesopotamia. It's slightly different than what you would expect, but that doesn't make it better or worse.
Right. It's kind of like also Rattle and Hum from U2 was quite the departure from their previous works. Joshua Tree was kind of getting there, but Rattle and Hum, with their search of music in America and that whole influence it's kind of like in that range too of like the Zootopia realm as well. Yeah, I would say Mesotopia is in that category.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to Whammy, released April 27th, 1983. It actually peaked at number 29 in the US and is certified gold. There were 3 singles off of this one. Legal Tender peaked the highest in the US, hitting number 81. But Song for a Future Generation hit the UK charts at number 63. So off of Whammy, what did you pick?
This was my most difficult choice because Whammy is my favorite album by B-52's. But my selection is Legal Tender because, first of all, the video, it was on MTV all the time, and I fell in love with it. And how many people have a song about making counterfeit money in their basement? I don't know many bands that have done that. And I was just like pulled in by that song when I was 12 years old. So I'm dating myself here, but it just had the tempo and the beat and the content, it was just one of my all-time favorite songs ever by any band, present or past.
I have to say, I think of all 8 albums that we're talking about, you say this is your favorite. I think this is actually one of my least favorite albums. I will admit that I was surprised by what album I considered to be my favorite, but we're gonna get to that album eventually. But there were some good songs off of this. Legal Tender, yes, is a good one. Work That Skirt is on my short list, and I have to say I really appreciate the fact that they add in some instrumentals. I was really shocked at how good the instrumentals were and how well they would work in a cinematic vibe. But for me, my pick off of this is actually Trism.
Oh, I like that song too. It almost made my short list. I have Butterbean, Whammy Kiss, and Song for a Future Generation on my short list.
I think the reason why this album didn't sit as well with me, at least as far as the ears go, is that I found the production value in comparison to some of the other albums a little on the thinner side of things. And maybe it's just the mastering, and maybe it's just the producer that they were working with. It's definitely a difference from working with David Byrne on Mesopotamia and then moving forward to eventually working with Don Was. But Trism still stands out wholeheartedly.
Right. I think for me, why it's my favorite album is because it's attached to so many of my memories, to seeing them for the first time on MTV. I think that's what endears me to this album. Although I agree with you on some of the points. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and that's always key. Is like what album speaks to you the most. More often than not, it's not anything on as far as the songs go. It's that personal moment. I mean, I could sit there and say like my favorite Krista Berg album is Man on the Line because that's the first time I ever got to see him live. Not Spanish Train, not Into the Fire, Man on the Line. That was the album for me because that was that first moment. Here, B-52's, yes, appearing on MTV, I can easily see how that would be like that core unlocking moment right there. Moving on to 1986 and Bouncing Off the Satellites. Released September 8th of that year, this album was unfortunately released a year after the death of Ricky Wilson. The album hit number 85 in the US, and there were 3 singles off of it. Summer of Love hit number 90 in Australia and number 35 in New Zealand, and Wig hit number 79 in the UK. This album, yes, it does have Ricky Wilson on there, but it had to be hard for them to be able to release this.
Oh, definitely. Ricky Wilson was a, a pivotal member of the group. And of course, Cindy Wilson was, his sister. So I can only imagine that going into the studio was painful that first time.
And then hearing those songs as they're released and then going on tour with them, like that can't have been easy for anyone in the band, especially Cindy. But the album's out there and there were some really good tracks off of this. So off of Bouncing Off the Satellites, what did you pick?
Well, for my short list, I chose Theme for a Nude Beach and Communicate along with Wig. But Housework was my favorite track.
We actually line up on this one. Yeah, Housework is definitely my pick off this. It's a bop, and you do hear a much better production value on this album. Like, it's a departure from Whammy. Like this, it sounded more full. It sounded like it was mastered properly. It sounded like they spent the time in the studio and really brought the most out of the mix in this.
Yes, I can tell that there is more richness in the sound, and the context is a lot different too. Just the basis of the songs have, I don't want to say more meaning, but it just has a different feel or a different flow to it than or Whammy did, rather.
Yeah, I mean, they're steering away a little bit from the crazy lyrics, if you want to put it, for lack of a better term. The songs are definitely much more structured at this point. But then lightning strikes in 1989 with the release of Cosmic Thing. Released on June 27th of that year, the band is now a 4-piece and was produced by Nile Rodgers and Don Was. The album hit number 4 in the US and number 1 in Australia and New Zealand. It is 4 times platinum in the US, double platinum in Australia, platinum in the UK, Canada, and New Zealand. There were 5 singles off of this one. Love Shack and Rome both peaked at number 3 in the US, but did hit number 1 in Australia, Ireland, and New Zealand for Love Shack. I'm surprised. I thought Love Shack was going to be a number 1 single because it was played everywhere. I'm surprised that it only hit number 3 in the US.
So am I. I thought it was number 1 also. That's crazy. Because like you said, it was everywhere and it is still everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember them playing the crap out of that video on Much Music. I guarantee you it hit number 1. It was everywhere. It was absolutely everywhere. And I mentioned DJing. I guarantee you I had a copy of Cosmic Thing. I played Love Shack every single dance, no matter where I DJ'd. And I thought this was going to be easy for me. I thought there was like, take a look at the album. Oh, it's Love Shack. It's all good. Nope. It's on my short list, as is Cosmic Thing and Follow Your Bliss. Let me talk about Follow Your Bliss for a second. That song should have been in a soundtrack, part of a score. It's great. As an instrumental, it's phenomenal. But I ended up going with Topaz. Again, this is the combination of Kate and Cindy harmonizing together, and it's almost, I don't want to say ethereal, but it's great. It's wonderful. The two of them together, that harmony basically carries the song, and I was surprised. I thought it was going to be an easy pick. I thought it was going to be Love Shack. I was wrong. Topaz surprised me. But off of Cosmic Thing, what did you go with?
Okay. Love Shack did make my short list for the reason being that you could go to karaoke and you could sing both Fred Schneider, Cindy Wilson, and Kate Pearson, no matter who you are. And depending on how many libations you have, you could, I don't know, drive somewhere. Well, no, not drive somewhere. That's not PC, but a Love Shack is definitely the place to be if you're gonna have some fun, I guess. That also made my short list, but not my pick. I also selected Junebug and Deadbeat Club as part of my short list, but my ultimate favorite is Channel Z.
Oh, that's a good song too. That's a really good song.
Yeah, it's a tough album to choose because I don't know. I think having Don Was and Nile Rodgers as, I mean, they're producing gold.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anyone who heard Walk the Dinosaur in the 80s, you knew that they had what it took in the studio to make the song sound bigger, sound full, sound, for lack of a better term, radio. Because there were some songs from the B-52's and on past albums that didn't necessarily sound radio. They were just catchy enough that radio still played them. Cosmic Thing, this album was made for radio. It was made for MTV and Much Music. It was made literally for everyone's ears.
It was. And Nile Rodgers, I mean, you can't deny what he did for INXS and Duran Duran. And he's still continuing to work along, and so is Don Was. But I mean, just the sheer brilliance of the both. It made for radio perfection, this album.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what changing a producer can do to the sound of the band and how it can really affect how those songs are heard. Again, Mesopotamia being, produced by David Byrne, you could hear the David Byrne influence on this. Cosmic Thing, you can hear the Nile Rodgers and the Don Was influence in it. Now, for our listeners, it is time to clarify something. In the break of the song, when Fred Schneider says, "You're what?" the actual lyric is "tin roof rusted." I have no idea what it means, but that's what she's saying. Don't think it's anything else. Because I'll admit, this is one of those misheard lyrics of all time.
Oh, it took me years to figure out what it was. And I'm like, it was what? I think that's what he's saying. What? tin roof roasted, like he said it before. He asked the question before she said it, not after. It should have been the other way around.
Just one of those things that made the song so catchy. And like, I think that actually caught on to more people. Like, again, speaking as a guy who plays in a band, I know that putting a pause in a song where like the instruments drop out, the lyrics keep going, it catches the audience off guard and it almost like draws their attention back in. This did the exact same thing for the world. And now you know what they said. Moving on to Good Stuff, released June 23rd, 1992. The band at this point is actually now a three-piece as Cindy Wilson stepped away for a bit to kind of recalibrate after everything. The album peaked at number 16 in the US and number 8 in the UK. It is gold in the US and silver in the UK. There were 5 singles off of this one. Good Stuff peaked the highest, hitting number 28 in the US. So off of this, what did you go with?
Okay. Good Stuff was definitely in my short list, along with Is That You, Modine, and Bad Influence. But my selection is Tell It Like It T.I. Is.
Oh, that one's got a bop to it. I was really enjoying that one. And I'll admit, this is the first time I actually listened to this album. I was a little surprised that I had never actually like fully listened to it. Vision of a Kiss made my short list. Really liked that song, but Bad Influence was my pick off of this. This is kind of has everything that you wanted of a B-52's song, and it's like sprinkled throughout. It's got funk vibe, bop, rock, the whole works to it. I was surprised how good Bad Influence was.
Yeah, that's why it was in my short list. It has all of those elements and then some, but Tell It Like a T.I.E.I. that is a bop, like you said.
And that's the thing too, like, again, not having listened to this album in its entirety really until this moment in this episode, I was surprised. Like, after Cosmic Thing too, after an album that hits so hard, it's got to be hard to come back and put something else out there. I mean, I do remember hearing Hot Pants Explosion, which was fun. It just didn't carry over like it did back then. But again, that last stretch, this is kind of where they put the meat for that hamburger on the bottom. Vision of a Kiss, Breezin', and Bad Influence, those 3 together, those are phenomenal songs. And this album really ended strong for me.
It does end strong. I think it's a great album. It's probably, I think I like it better than Cosmic Thing. I know I'm going to get like, ooh. But I just love the flow of the songs and the boppiness of a lot of the material on there.
Actually, you know what's funny? When we talked about Wild Planet being kind of like the hamburger and all the meats in the middle, as I take a look at the track listing here and the 10 songs on it, this is literally the KFC double down of albums, because your album starts with Tell It Like It T.I. Is, Hot Pants Explosion, and Good Stuff. You got a couple more songs there. And then you end with Vision of a Kiss, Breezin', and Bad Influence. This is the double down of burgers. And for the record, if anyone has ever actually eaten the double down, don't. Just don't. I tried it once and I couldn't feel my leg after. It was really weird.
Oh my gosh.
It's like all the sodium all at once.
Oh my goodness. I can only imagine. I don't know. I think I would need my cardiologist on speed dial. I don't have a cardiologist, but I think I would need one after that.
I literally, if you were to order one, just dial 911, and by the time you get through the sandwich, dial the other one. You're going to need it. We now get to our final album on this journey, Funplex, released March 25th, 2008. So that's 16 years after the release of Good Stuff, and the album is produced by Steve Osborne. Cindy Wilson is now back in the band, so the band is a 4-piece. Hit number 11 in the US. However, the 2 singles off of this one, Funplex and Juliet of the Spirits, unfortunately did not chart. Holy crap. This album had to be my favorite front to back album from the entire discography.
Huh. I like that.
Like
that's really cool.
yeah, no, like I was surprised because again, I didn't even know this album existed. I thought after Good Stuff, it's like they just kind of packed up shop. And then it's like, wait, there's a 2008 album? Dive into it. The production on this sounds to me better than Cosmic Thing did. Steve Osborne did a fantastic job with this album. The band put together some phenomenal songs. Like this, if you are a B-52's fan and you don't have this CD in your collection, you're missing out.
First of all, shame on you if you don't have this album and you're a B-52's fan. I think the title of the album just, I think, describes what it is. It's a funplex. It's great. I love the songs. Everything. It's a kicker. The two singles though, I don't think they picked the right singles for this album. I really Pump and the title track Funplex were on my short list along with Ultraviolet, but I really think that they should have released Hot Corner. That's my favorite song, and I think it has something to it that I don't know. There's just something more to it than the two that they selected. I don't know. Maybe it's me.
I mean, you're not wrong about Pump and Ultraviolet because that's actually my short list right there is those two songs. And this album, like it literally punches you in the mouth right off the bat. Those first 5 songs, Pump, Hot Corner, Ultraviolet, Juliet of the Spirits, and Funplex, that is a monster start to an album and probably the strongest start to an album that the B-52s have ever put out through their discography. Like just at least as far as your first initial track listings, I was listening to this. I'm like, where was this album? Why was this not played on radio? How are these singles not charting? Because I ended up picking Juliet of the Spirits as my pick. This song needs to be on a soundtrack. It feels almost like a John Hughes film song. It feels like it would fit right into like a Pretty in Pink. Maybe not a Breakfast Club per se, but some kind of, or even a She's All That. Juliet of the Spirits really feels like it fits into that teen rom-com kind of vibe. And I'm surprised that no one has picked up on this song as far as a soundtrack goes.
I think you're right. It does sound like a soundtrack song, like maybe a 16 Candles or a Breakfast Club, like you said, or even a Valley Girl.
I could see that. And it's funny because as I'm just looking at my information here, so the song was actually apparently inspired by the film Juliet of the Spirits, which was an Italian film from 1965. So it makes sense now why it feels like it should be in a film. So I guess if anyone's ever going to do a remake of Juliet of the Spirits for North America, hey, I have an idea. Here's a song for it because it was inspired by the original film. So go with it. And there were so many songs from the B-52 soundtrack that could fit into a, maybe not necessarily the rom-coms, but definitely in those coming of age type films, especially ones that you saw in the 90s. Like I could easily see so many B-52's songs fit into that kind of movie soundtrack.
Especially the instrumentals, like you mentioned previously. I think those would be great in a film, like even in a club scene or a driving montage, something to that effect. Yeah, I could definitely. And I think B-52s should be in a couple of movies, like even like the quirky like 80s movies, like Earth Girls Are Easy or or something like that,
Oh my God, you just picked a phenomenal film right there. Earth Girls Are Easy. So good. So good.
I love that movie.
It is so campy and so fun.
I love those campy movies. Like the campier, the better. Like I'm all Warriors and Earth Girls Are Easy. And oh gosh, like the cornier, the better. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Give me a B movie any day.
All right, Sherry. So now that we've reached the end of our discography, now comes the hard part. So please remind our listeners what songs you picked in order from first to last. And if there can only be one B-52 song from the songs that you have picked from the 8 albums, what one song is it going to be?
Okay. From their debut album, the B-52's, I chose 6060842. From 1983's Wild Planet, I chose Private Idaho. From Mesopotamia, I chose Nip It in the Bud. From Whammy, released in 1983, Legal Tender. Bouncing Off the Satellites, Housework. From Cosmic Thing, I chose Channel Z. From Good Stuff, Tell It Like It T.I. Is. And from Funplex, I chose Hot Corner. But if I only had to choose one, it would be Legal Tender.
Such a good song. Such a good song. Also, now it makes me wonder if you have any counterfeit money on hand. But, we're not saying, but possibly. All right, for me, I went with the Rock Lobster from the self-titled debut album. From Wild Planet, I went with Devil in My Car. Off of Mesopotamia, I went with Throw That Beat in the Garbage. From Whammy, I went with Trism. From Bouncing Off the Satellites, I picked Housework. Off of Cosmic Thing, I went with Topaz. From Good Stuff, I picked Bad Influence. And from Funplex, I went with Juliet of the Spirits. And if Rock Lobster didn't have the core memories attached to it that I have attached to it, then Rock Lobster wouldn't be my pick. Juliet of the Spirits, from a musical standpoint, would have been my pick. But you can't not pick Rock Lobster because it's freaking Rock Lobster. I lived and breathed that song growing up. Has to be that for days. But Juliet of the Spirits, from a musical standpoint, does make the pick hard. Sherry, thank you so much for this. Now, please, before we go, remind our listeners where they can find you out there on the interwebs and where they can find the Aquarian Weekly.
Okay. First of all, you could find me on Instagram. That's my primary social media. I'm at Sherry, SHERRYT, music journalist. I know it's a very long handle, but that's where I'm located. That's my primary social media where I post random photos and give information about my articles, or when I'm playing on a show that I have on an app called Station Head, or you could find my articles at the Aquarian Weekly, which is at theaquarian.com.
Sherry, thank you so much for this. And thank you for basically introducing me to albums I had never experienced and never thought I even existed. Funplex was such a fun deep dive, so thank you for that. Now, to you, our listeners, you guys know the drill. If there's an artist that you want us to cover or an album that you want us to cover on Spin Shuffle Skip, be sure to hit us up on social media at OnlyOneCast or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out our coming soon page so you can see all the episodes that we're preparing. Get your chime-ins in. We'll shout you out throughout the show. Until next time, she's Sherry, I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is There Can Only Be One, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.